Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Good evening, Sarah. I'm doing well. How about you?
Apparently, my voice is already fading.
Oh no, you can't be doing that. We got 3 episodes of Doom Patrol to talk.
I know, but that really got me off guard. No, I'm hanging in there. I'm doing
That's
fine. It's just been a very chill weekend, you
yeah,
know.
same. Yeah, same here. Same here. It was a good weekend to kick off to a new season and threw some stuff on the grill. So yeah, it was a good weekend.
It was a good weekend. Before we get into those 3 episodes of Doom Patrol, though, there was some quote unquote news happening, and of course about my favorite company to or franchise to talk about, the DCEU. There was a lot of mixed stories, but Wonder Woman has another release date,
Hmm.
as do most films these days. But there's also a something was explained about how there might be rewrites to Wonder Woman 2, and there will be likely rewrites to Wonder Woman 3 because of everything that's going on. It just didn't make sense
Hmm.
anymore, I guess. Is that what you understood, Will?
That was my understanding, and which is interesting given that I have assumed all this time that Wonder Woman 84, which also known as Wonder Woman 2, was in the can. So if they're going to be doing rewrites, that means they're going to. I mean, I would have to imagine reshoots as well. And given that, either if it's reshoots or maybe Patty is just tinkering with the cut to maybe put some things in it that was in there before and taking stuff that's in there now out. So we'll see. But and also I think I saw where she was just like everyone at this point uncertain about Wonder Woman 3 even happening. She just
Right.
kind of said she's kind of taking a wait and see approach because as we know this film has been moved around. It was supposed to come out this summer and it got pushed back to I think about October now.
Hmm.
And so who knows, because I mean like you said, this week alone films that were supposed to finally start coming out in July are already getting pushed back to August. And and given what's going on with COVID, who knows now if even the August dates will stay in place. So uh, it's it's just a messed up world we're in right now.
It is fascinating though,
Yeah.
because I like you. I'm thinking it's in the can.
Hmm.
I understand we have a lot of time to think and self-reflect right now, but you spent so much money and time producing this project, and you have it all ready to go, and then a pandemic hits and suddenly it's not good enough. And so when I first found out about this, I really instantly thought, you in 10, 20 years, there's going to be a lot of documentaries, there's going
Hmm.
to be a lot of think pieces about the lost year of cinema and
Yeah.
what 2020 could have been, should have been, and how that domino effect of,
Hmm.
and then this project got canceled and that's why this one got produced, and that's why, like, who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
we're splitting our own timeline essentially.
Yeah, we are. And and it really begs the question with some of these films. 'Cause I know some studios have or put things straight to their streaming platforms. And
Right.
and so we do know that Warner Media now does have HBO Max, and it's definitely looking for content. And this would, even though I totally understand why they would want to have it released in a big theatrical setting, from the box office standpoint, trying to return on investment and all that kind of thing. You begin to like wonder when some of these big tentpole franchise films may start to end up on some of those streaming services. Because because I looked at Disney and Mulan. I mean, again, it got pushed back. Tenet got pushed back. I mean, it's not a tentpole franchise film, but again, um,
Oh, Tenet is for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Because here's what Tenet is. Tenet is meant for the big screen. Christopher Nolan
yeah,
doesn't make movies
true, true,
so you can watch them on your laptops. He makes them so
yeah,
that you can go to the cinema and have a 360-degree fully immersive experience, or as immersive as you can get through this medium.
right,
And that is why he is so hard pressed on this has to be released in the cinemas.
yeah, yeah,
And that's a great point to bring up, because I think whether it's the franchise movies with the billion-dollar budgets, or it's the filmmakers like Christopher Nolan whose concept of cinema and what that means is totally tied to the theater experience.
hmm,
Well, who knows when COVID will end? Who knows how, even if you do open up the theaters again, who will go and who will just wait for it to be released online, or who will be like, I'm not going to risk my life, or even want it. I
yeah,
think a lot of, when you do get finally open up the theaters, how many people are going to be cramming to go back to them? And so
yeah,
what
yeah,
will the taste levels be like? And even the return on investment concept, maybe budgets start to drop for movies because there
yeah.
is no guarantee.
That's a very good point because I mean, yeah, I was just reading a deadline I think over the weekend how I mean some areas like Vancouver where they've been very good about their restrictions and stuff. They are talking about letting those studios reopen. But then you look in Los Angeles and you look in California where the numbers are, where they were moving towards reopening and reopening production, and now because COVID cases are starting to uptick in those areas, they're looking at scaling that back and putting things on pause. So it really is a huge uncertainty for the entertainment industry at this point, just like many sectors, but in particular for them because again, as states were reopening their movie theaters and stuff, now they're starting some that were open or reopening or putting things on pause, and others are maybe in another week or so if things don't improve, we'll start seeing various restrictions coming back into place. So it's very hard, and I really feel for anyone, all sectors, but definitely the entertainment sector because uh, it's definitely having an impact on their bottom line.
Yeah, it is. I also think we're going to see a lot of creativity, and I'm really hopeful that movies that were released maybe 2 years ago, who a lot of people didn't check out, suddenly there's nothing on. Suddenly you're not going to the theater anymore, and then you find them. I think that this is a really interesting time where
Yeah,
those cult classic movies people return to or discover, and it maybe that will then reinvent the way we view future films. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I mean, I know I've been going through a lot of movies. I watched Blind Spotting for the last time,
Huh.
which, if you haven't seen it, very fascinating movie. I still have no idea what genre you would call it. It is just um yeah, but it's something to check out. It's a very independent film that was released in 2018. So, but it's very relevant to what's going on right now. And I encourage people to check it out. But anyways, so so moving on to things that are getting released
Hmm.
and things that have been in the can and we've just been waiting for. Season 2 Doom Patrol is back.
Yep.
And I took I did not binge, Will. I did not binge this, and I'm very excited. I literally, from Friday through today,
Hmm.
watched one episode a day.
Okay. Yeah, I watched episode 1 Thursday night, and then I did watch 2 and 3 back to back because
Mhm.
after and we'll get into it, but I I had to. I really did, for various reasons, but uh, I this season, uh, it's also been, speaking of COVID and things, not to keep on that note, but just so folks know, Doom Patrol was also impacted by COVID as well, and so uh, there's only going to be 9 episodes in season 2, and we got the first 3 this week. So,
Oh dear.
yeah,
How dare they?
yeah. So, yeah, but as far as welcoming them back, I this my just sort of kickoff thoughts on season 2. Uh, I thought the first episode was, I think it has some pacing issues, but overall, I think the series it so far has not had a sophomore slump. That's just my top line thoughts about it.
I I think that you're right. I I went in with very high expectations, and we all know, we've heard it before. When I go in with high expectations, usually they're not met. And they weren't. But then again, I was not disappointed either. I really liked their first episode looking back on it, because it didn't it just started exactly where we left off in a
Yep.
way. And all of the characters, there were they were weaving so much exposition, but it was all everything was active, and you really, there was a lot of movement, and there was a lot of there was good pacing. See, I didn't have an issue with the episode 1 and its pacing, because
Huh.
I felt like everything was setting the stage for the next half. I mean, we all know
Yeah.
at by the end of the episode they would be brought back to full size,
Right.
but we were just instantly dropped in. This is how they've been living their lives for the past few months, I think. I think
Hmm.
it's a few months
Yeah.
in this environment, and these are the connections, and this is Dorothy, and this is her story. I think Dorothy, unfortunately, she does have a tendency to slow everything down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that makes me not like her. But
See,
and
I was fascinated by Dorothy.
see, and I wasn't. There was something, because I just want to get to Cliff. I just want to get to Cliff. I want to get to Jane.
Yeah.
Rita's in an interesting place this season.
Hmm.
Vic, okay, guys, come on. He leaves at the end of episode 1. Rita appears to be the only one who cares, and for the next 2 episodes, no one questions where's Vic.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. I did not. I didn't notice that he was. I mean, I noticed he was missing, but you're right. No one was like, Where's Vic?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone is very selfish in
Yeah.
a way. And
Yeah.
and I mean, we felt that a lot during the first season, but I kind of felt as if by the end of the first season they were a team, they were a family.
Hmm.
And this season and the setup, I think because the writers are planting a lot of seeds for this season, they had to almost separate everyone, and to really move things along, to
Yeah.
kind of remind us, okay, this is Cliff, this is where he is,
Hmm.
and this is what he's dealing with, this is Jane, and so on and so forth,
Right.
while at the same time introducing Dorothy
Hmm.
and this dynamic she has with Niles and her imaginary friends, and this 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 bond, or this feeling of loyalty, I guess you
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah. I get that. Um, with with the team, and so I guess when I said as far as pacing, I think maybe. I think it was probably just my anticipation, because I have just been so looking forward to this the return of this show.
Mhm.
But So I like the way that, and I saw the sneak peek. I mean, that they shared on the watch party earlier last week, where they introduced Dorothy in there. But of course, being a Doom Patrol, the whole circus environment and all the sounds and the atmosphere, the workers hooking up, and just all the things going on, surrounding Dorothy, to just sort of show how this poor 11-year-old girl has been taken captive, and really setting that the dynamic of, that why the chief had to, and Niles had to find her, and rescue her from this environment, feeling, again, atoning for his his sins, or for abandoning her, whenever whenever we had the very weird episode in episode 1, where he did, you know stay with her, made it with her mother, and so we had all that kind of set up, and and it really does sort of flow into the whole construct of this show, as far as like people having to deal with their various interpersonal and internal conflicts and dramas that they have, either circumstances brought on them, or created because of, at the end of the day, what Niles Calder did to them. And so it was, so the way they introduced her, and her conjuring powers of of her friends, and also one in particular, the Candlemaker,
Mm.
was very like in your face, and it was like, holy shit, I'm in for a good ride this season, because Dorothy is definitely a character to be reckoned with, and will fit in well with the rest of the team.
It was Dumbo. It- I that is probably one of the scenes that I've really liked with Dorothy, because to kick off the season, it's the circus environment, freaks, right?
Yeah, right,
And
right.
people who are rejects of society because of the way they appear. And that has always been a theme in this show, is that this group of quote unquote heroes
Mhm.
are also rejects.
Yeah.
They are lost causes. And at one point in this episode, they even talk about that they're Niles' failed experiments, or
Mhm.
I think maybe even in a later episode. And that is really hard to come to terms with. And I think that's why these characters, despite all of the events and progress they made in season 1, are still broken, because
Yeah. Yeah.
Niles, now that he's back, he's still this reminder that you did this to us,
Mm-hmm.
and and in a way you saved us, but in a way you broke us. And what do we do now? And who are we? And I think at one point Rita even says, "Who are we when we can't even control our limbs?"
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
So I really liked all of that, and I think that the Niles and Dorothy relationship being flaunted in front of Cliff
Oh, yeah.
really does Cliff a great kickoff to his whole arc this season,
Mhm.
because he's being shown the very thing he has never been able to have and will never be able to have in his current state. And it's ironic, right? The
Right.
writers do a very good job, because Niles is envious of all of these people, because yes, they are failed experiments, but they have eternal life.
Right. Right.
And that is the very thing that he is striving after. Which, okay, another weird thing.
Mhm.
Does Dorothy have eternal life?
I don't know. So that was a good question. I'm not sure if she was immortal or not. But because, uh, on the one hand, with the Faustian bargain that Niles made to be able, to get the talisman, um, to outlive her. Um, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if I guess she does have eternal life. I mean, I don't know if she's prepared, if but or if she's just slow aging like him. She'll eventually die. But um, I wasn't clear about that, and I wasn't clear, if she is actually going to age at all, because she is this perpetually as an 11-year-old girl when we first saw her in 1927, and of course in present day, after being hidden away for 66 years or however long, she still is this kid.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And
I mean,
maybe that's just because she was in Danny the Brick, and that's why, maybe time, it doesn't matter in Danny, and maybe that's why she is still in that place.
we'll get to time. We'll get to time for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But Danny Brick is also a great thing. That's another thing that really excited me when I was watching these episodes is how many callbacks to the first season there were.
Yeah.
And the rats. Come on, guy. I love how Cliff would always go to quote unquote feed them. He would tally, and then at one point he even becomes Rat Man in the episode. He comes there. It's just it is those little tidbits.
Yeah. I was just expecting Admiral Whiskers to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. You're suddenly in on all of the inside jokes, and you feel as if there hasn't been a time lapse because they're calling back to so many things that happened in the first season. Relevant things.
Yeah, yeah.
So any other thoughts on the first episode?
We can't leave the first episode without talking about Larry, because I think, whereas Vic had his where he kind of disappeared off, Larry the caretaker it was an interesting juxtaposition, because he's taking such good care of his friends, but then when we see Larry before his interaction meeting with Niles, his interaction with his son Gary, and how much of a dick of a father he was. I mean, because we get obviously we understand from season 1, and even when he has the flashback with I can't remember his partner, his partner's name, who he was having an affair with, but there was that, so he, of course, was struggling with coming out and being closeted in test pilot. But then we get to his family life, and we see, his son's all excited because daddy, you're gonna go up in this rocket ship and rocket plane, and then he just like crushes his son. It's like, it's just, it was just, so it was, so seeing that, and then seeing how he was so much of a caretaker for the Doom Patrol when they were in fun size mode, and it was definitely, again, like you're saying, reminds us how broken these folks are, but also was planting the seeds for things that were to come in future episodes.
Yeah, a lot of father and son dynamics, or father and child.
Yeah.
This idea of legacy, this idea of I am now immortal, yet the things that make life, which is love, family, and caring, I rejected mine. Like, in a way, I think with Larry, he is now a freak who's rejected by society, but initially he rejected in that moment his son and his family, because even though he as a father loves his kids, he still felt it felt wrong because of who he was and other things he was dealing with, and his love for this other man. And it felt fake. It didn't feel authentic. And I think that is why he's always been a caregiver to the Doom Patrol. I
Yeah.
mean, when we first meet him on Titans, he's the one making breakfast and
Yeah. Yeah.
so many courses. And that's always, and so it's almost he's on his own redemption story for rewriting those wrongs of what he did. And I like it. I like how that goes into the second episode where upon finding out his son died, he goes to the funeral and comes across his other son. And I loved that whole scene was just really acted beautifully of you're my father who I thought has been dead.
Hmm.
My brother just it sounded like he died of suicide, right?
He did. Yeah.
Yeah, suicide. Has always thought that you were alive.
Hmm.
So it's so many emotions that actor had to play
Yeah.
within those few minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just hats off to both Matthew Zuck and Larry Ballmer and Matt Ballmer for doing the voice work, because it was that whole that that, and that's what I love about this show. It's all character driven, and yes, there is action and things we do see in the superhero tropes, but I mean that was a true character moment of really Larry coming to grips and coming to realize the as you were saying before, he won't be able to make up for his fake his feelings and things he did whenever with Gary now. And whenever he was in the barn and going through the letters, and he found a letter that said I thought you went out to space, but mommy was won't stop crying. And just it was just so like devastating in that moment. I was just like seeing that and just really just feeling so much empathy for Larry in that moment, because he knowing that he's not going to be able to make amends with Gary now, and after seeing that letter, and knowing that even though all would happen, that moment that we saw in the first episode with the plane, his kid, Gary still loved his dad, and now Larry won't be able to get that moment, but also Paul, his other son, being able to be still open and say, look, Pops, we know something happened, but you're still my father. And I love the way they played that scene too with the voice, as far as Paul being able to figure out that was his dad there. I mean, just genius writing and just genius way of just acting, of having that scene play out. It Yeah, but also giving Larry that second chance to at least be able to have some sense of closure or whatever with his family.
Yeah. And it also set up one of my favorite lines of the episode where Larry announces to the Doom Patrol that his son has died. And so they understand where he's going. And Cliff responds, "Did the chief get him too?"
Yeah. Yeah. I love that line too. Yeah. To the chief. Brendan.
It's just, oh my God, I love the humor. The humor is so twisted in this show, but
It is.
Brendan Fraser executes it so well every single time.
He does. He does. And yeah, and Riley Shanahan playing Robot Man. Just the physical mannerisms. I mean, that's what I just really love about this show. Why I was just so excited for it to come back.
Yeah, yeah. So while Larry is at the funeral, we also go to Detroit with Vic, where he ends up getting some PTSD because he's dealing with a lot of PTSD, and we've seen that since the very first season, through the explosion that led to him becoming a cyborg.
Mm-hmm.
And then also everything that happened between him and Mr. Nobody, and not being able to trust himself and his instincts. And so we find him still dealing with that and having to leave the team for a period of time as he goes and tries to resolve some of those issues and
Right.
get laid.
Yeah.
Get laid. I I still I still wish that there was a way for them to do this with a pair. I feel Larry's independence in this first 3 episodes makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And then they bring it back when Rita helps him in the 3rd episode. And that's what I'm missing with Vic. I'm missing
Yeah.
that tie-in, and I hope we're able to see, because these characters, they are really good on their own, but they just raise to supreme levels when they bounce off of each other
They
and
do.
when there is that chemistry, because as much as they are different and unique, they are so similar, and they are so much like a family that's what I miss. That's why my favorite episode of the first season is Doom Therapy, because that's a bottle episode where it's just them
Yeah.
on this weird, having this weird day, and so hopefully Vic comes back and we get some of those dynamics, because he's part of the team and he has a place there. So I that is what I'm missing with Vic.
Yeah. I see. I actually, so Vic is, he has a very interesting like role with the team because he's the Justice Leaguer. He is the traditional superhero, and the thing about this show is where you won't be able, if he were like on Titans, we wouldn't be able to see this self exploration of his indecision and uncertainty about himself. Uh,
Right.
and so because I think, thinking to your point, how the characters play off each other. I'm thinking his interactions this season with Rita, and
Mhm.
given that Rita is now kind of trying to embrace the hero role, and the first time he in a training and Fun Size Patrol was him insulting her to help her try to uh, realize how to use her powers and stuff. So even though yes, they do work well together, but also I kind of like the story where Vic is off again, sort of like whenever they were in the butt farm last year, whenever he had to rescue his father.
Mhm.
Uh, Vic also going through this group, and you know with him having to turn off his monitor on his eye,
Mhm.
because again, he was still trying to hold up the veneer of, I am the tough superhero who has all his shit put together, but no, he doesn't. And for the rest of the group to like say, look, we've got to turn it off, turn off the cyborg light, so we can really see the true you. Was that couldn't have happened if he was still with the rest of the team. So I think it needed that, so I think they needed to separate him for a little bit so that when he comes back, he will have more confidence in himself, and can really play that role of keeping things together, because Cliff is Cliff. Jane is fighting, trying to, of course, now with her battles with the rest of the 63 other personalities, as far as her 64 other personalities trying to become the primary, and her struggles. So Vic I think, is going to be that centering influence that the rest of the team is going to need when he comes back to them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree. I understand why they're doing this in this way, and it's very reminiscent of what they did with him in season 1. I'm just saying, let's keep the number of episodes limited, because this team, this ensemble cast works so well together.
Yeah. They do.
have multiple episodes with them on screen together than one-off stories. Like, don't pull a Titans. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think they'll do that. I have confidence in them that they will not do that.
And it is, even though they only had that one scene together in the first episode, it really does launch itself and build that perfect starting point for Rita in the second episode, when she is able to have a very Doom Patrol-esque superhero moment, and she pulls the helmet off of Dr. Time, not realizing that, oh, that's not a helmet.
Yeah.
That is not, but she fixes it in a very smart way, and essentially, because they figure out Niles is now dying, they need to help him solve this situation that he's been dealing with for centuries. How does he keep eluding death? And this is another thing that I don't know where I fall on it. The first season was about where is Niles. The second season is about how do we save Niles.
Yep.
Okay. What the heck will be the third season?
How do we kill Niles?
Yeah, how do we kill Niles? Or Niles is dead. So what do we do now? I don't. How do we bring him back?
Yeah, Niles is a very interesting character, because on the one, is he a villain? Is he a victim? Is he something in between? I mean, that's, and I guess that's that central, as you said, it's like, that was some of the central themes that they were building their seasons around. And and he is such a manipulator, and we saw that again, like in the episode where how he basically Jedi mind tricks him into, and Cliff in particular, because you think about Cliff, with this time patrol starts out with them again having Vic and Niles having their one-on-one time together, and Cliff, and so Cliff is constantly reminded, especially now that Dorothy's there, Niles, you're getting the very thing that I don't have, and it's because of you. And then you are now trying to get us to protect your daughter. At the same time, you took my daughter away from me. And he, and whenever they were planning on going after Dr. Time to get the Continuinium, he's like, F this, I'm not doing that. And then, of course, somehow now they manipulate him back into the fold, and it's like, okay, I'm going to go do this, and we're going to go get the Continuinium from Dr. Time. So Niles is just a interesting character that is just the perfect foil to just kick off so many events in this series.
He is. And I think it goes back to what you were just starting to say, in the sense that he is so flawed, and almost the very physical representation of humanity, and how flawed we all are and how broken we all are. And these other beings, like he's the human of the whole show.
Yeah, he is.
He's the lowest lane. Okay, let's not get it twisted. And all of these other characters, they want to be like him. They want to be human. They want to be normal, and they can't because of their conditions. And I think in a way, when we also think about it, all of them are projecting. Niles made some decisions and set up some situations that, of course, led to where they are now. Right. However, that I think a lot of them, or probably all of them, are still mad about their own decisions that led them to that place that then Niles was able to manipulate and do his thing. They're not innocent in their circumstance. Rita exemplifies that, I think, the most out of all the characters, where she was such a vain and this creature who strived for perfection, that when she lost it all, she still, as she spent decades learning how to control this, and now through season 1 she realized, oh, this can be a hero. I can actually do things with this very thing that I was trying to like push down is now a strength. But it still makes me ugly. And I think there's just something very interesting. So Niles is I don't know if he's a MacGuffin or if
Mhm.
he's just the straight man that this show needs to really work.
Mhm.
I just hope that he isn't used in that way for the 3rd season, because then we got some repetitious.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe
um,
maybe they'll bring Mr. Nobody back. Who knows?
yeah, yeah. We'll just get Rita to draw do some Pictionary, which that
Yeah,
whole scene with her explaining Doctor Time was perfect. I
that
love
was.
that.
Yeah.
I also, a character we haven't talked a lot about, which is surprising because I feel as if when we talked first season, majority of time we were talking about her, but Jane.
Yeah.
And in a way that we haven't gotten there in these first 3 episodes. Jane is really on the back burner because they are doing a lot of setup. A
Yeah.
lot of setup with her and the underground, and Kay, right? Kay is the child.
So Kay is that's the child who, yeah. So, and of course Jane is the um, primary
Mhm.
personality. So Kay was the one that we learned in season 1 was but sexually abused by her father, and so yeah, so obviously these personalities were developed within her, obviously for various coping mechanisms, etc. So yes, Kay's a child. Uh,
Miranda's another alter who at
right,
one point was in control, but then threw
correct,
herself in the well, and now everyone in the underground is wanting Miranda to be the primary
right.
because Jane has been using drugs to kind of control
Mm,
her, because she still, despite everything in season 1, has a lot of issues to go work through.
right. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yes,
Huh.
yeah, because I guess because whenever we first, uh, you know, I guess was in episode 1, it was like time for a change.
Yeah,
What
yeah. From the very beginning,
from the
time
very
for.
beginning, time for a change, and then so all the, so we saw Hammerhead and we saw some of the secretary and some of the other characters come out and you know really begin to tell Jane, look, you got to stop doping, and and of course, and even I guess even when thinking back to episode 1 when Dorothy came into Jane's tent. I mean, I think Jane was about to shoot up, if I recall.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so that that dynamic, and then of course, with the scene of Jane's finally meeting Miranda, seeing Miranda, and and the whole exorcism and throwing it into the well, and the whole situation there. And then, of course, when we get to the 3rd episode, um, Jane basically like gets catatonic on the bus.
Yeah.
We're seeing that whole the whole underground just really fighting for control of Kay.
Right. 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 Absolutely. Anything else about the second episode?
Second episode, I really that was the whole sequence when they were in Doctor Time's uh time portal where he was,
Mhm.
and also when whenever Rita did pull out and seeing the brains, shooting all the prior individuals who tried to get to continuum from him, in that whole sequence was I really enjoyed that moment too, because even though it was hokey and cheesy, but it also had the same level of like danger as well. So that only this show could pull off. So I thought that was one of the other things that really stood out to me in the episode as far as the first three.
Once we have a Danny Street episode, I don't think anything can be hokey.
Yeah, that's true.
Because for a while I was thinking that episode, when I saw just the image when you go to choose the episode, I thought it was going to be all based on Danny Street, and I'm like, great, more season 1 tie-in, and then I watched the first episode and realized Danny's a brick.
Yeah.
But so I thought I agree with you that is a scene that only Doom Patrol could really pull off, and it makes sense in the world, which just leads us into the third episode, where again you have another arc where some of the characters travel into an interdimensional space, because Niles has apparently met in his journeys every single immortal being. So look out there. You might come across some more. As a kid, he encounters the Red Jack, and who's a demon who feeds off of pain, but is also now lonely and wants a apprentice, i.e. Niles, and which I didn't see coming, and I thought was a really clever thing to do, because this could have just felt as if a villain of the week, a we need to go save Larry, but the fact that we knew Niles knew the Red Jack from his childhood, and then going into this third episode with this need for immortality because of Dorothy, and knowing Dorothy is still contemplating her wish to the Candlemaker, and if she uses that on Niles or not, and that's his biggest fear, that she would. The Red Jack then says, if you're my apprentice, you will be immortal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, yeah, all right, now I understand why we're doing this. This suddenly just raised into really an interesting dilemma to put that character in.
Totally. It totally did. And again, Calder, I think what was this line that he needed? I think he needed to do this to protect someone I love. I'm paraphrasing, but but Red Jack wanted him to be his apprentice, and then tempting him with the immortality, and seeing that up to this point, I mean, Calder has done some very heinous things to protect Dorothy. Right. So it just it does make total sense that he would once again do what was, make some deal with the devil, literally, to achieve immortality. And that whole showdown with the two of them in the dining in the feast room was just so chilling, and I really felt, I was like, now on the one hand, I know he won't accept it, because that would just be the end of the show. But on the other hand, I did have a moment where I was like, he actually may do this.
Right. At what cost, and I think they will continue to go back to that with Niles. The closer he gets to that, they've really, in one episode, arguably, they set up the stakes for this season in a very masterfully way. And that's why as the episodes grow, you start to really understand those stakes more and more. And we are definitely headed to a climax where Dorothy and Niles, their characters and their decisions will definitely be called into question because the stakes are so high for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I'm really looking forward to that because that's just payoff right there.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know how it'll happen. I mean, and a part of me wonders, is Niles going to have to take out Dorothy? Because if she makes that wish, which she very will, it was such a, the moment when she says goodnight to everyone and the candlemaker says must protect father or something. I
Mm-hmm.
forget exactly what he says. And she says maybe another time or something. It was just this idea that she's smart. She knows exactly the card she has up her sleeve. And she might do that because she wants Niles and her to be together forever because we saw her at her lowest when she didn't have Niles and she does not want to go back there and I don't blame her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, that was great. And at the same time, we are also, this is a very heavy Larry and Rita episode as we get flashbacks to when Larry was first brought to the house and Rita was already there and him finding home in that memory while at the same time um, being placed in this house of pain, so to speak, and her trying to rescue him, and while he is in a lot of pain because of what he realizes he missed out on,
Mm-hmm.
what his rejection of his kids, and a lot of stuff. What were your thoughts about these two in this episode?
This, I mean, this was a pretty dark episode when you think about it. What
Mhm.
all transpired. I mean, not only dark in the sense of just the tone, but also the how things the pain. I mean, Larry was literally up on racks, getting
Mhm.
physically tortured by Red Jack, and and for Red Jack's pleasure. So he was dealing with all of that while also reliving all the emotional trauma that he had coming to Doom Manor and coming to and reliving all the, as you noted, the things that he has done in his life and the mistakes he's made, and of course Rita. We saw some of that in the first season, and I like the way they again carried it forward into the second season because it really helped to show how Rita, of all the characters that we've seen so far, she's probably the one that has grown the most. And for her to go with the chief into to rescue Larry from Red Jack, gets to our point that we made earlier tonight in that she is starting to embrace this hero thing. And so it made total sense for her to go do this with the chief. And so I liked that because again it's showing growth with these characters, and even though it was just such pain that Larry was in, um, when they realize, as once they, and the physical pain that they both were in whenever Red Jack was causing them to morph into the butterflies,
Yep.
um, whenever they were able to overcome that with, when the chief also defeated Red Jack, and they realize as they're walking down the hall how all these butterflies are all the victims of Red Jack's uh, torture chamber for his pleasure and breaking them free. It was also it was also for them that same kind of breaking free. We're breaking free from all the crap that we've been dealing with all these years. So hopefully, as we move forward in the season, we'll start to see them grow from this experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It again, something that they are really doing well, and I think is why a lot of shows fall into a sophomore slump, is because the second season will go beat for beat what they did the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
And it never works. And in a way, the writers have really been smart in making everything feel very reminiscent without feeling exactly the same. There has been progress with these characters,
Hmm.
but they are still the same crew who we met at the beginning of the show, and this is the same world that they spent a lot of time really crafting, so that when you encounter characters like Red Jack or Dr. Time, you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you seen Dorothy? Yeah,
Yeah,
I get
exactly.
it.
Yeah, you
Weird,
totally get it.
strange
Yeah.
things happen. It makes sense. We were fighting rats at one point. I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Rats and cockroaches were making out on the street. Yeah. 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 We get it. Yeah.
Yeah, the image I never want to see again. So
No.
thank you. But yeah. So I just because I remember early on in the first season, Larry and Rita had a lot of screen time together, and this episode brought it back. And that's again goes back to my thoughts about Vic, is that these characters may go off on their solo missions, but what makes them a team and what makes them family is the fact that it always somebody else has to go and find them to bring them back. I mean, beyond this pairing, we also got the classic Jane and Cliff dynamic. Arguably, though, it wasn't on par with season one, because Jane, as much as she tagged along for this adventure, she is definitely not in a place where she can be Cliff's cheerleader or stand-in daughter.
Yeah.
She has some stuff that she is working on, and she doesn't have time to help him, which then, of course, makes him,
Leads up to very disastrous.
there's
Yeah.
a way, Cliff, and there's not a way, and you just chose the wrong way, my friend.
Yeah.
Tensions, yeah. He finally meets his daughter, and it goes the worst way. She calls cops on him, and
Yeah.
there's some funny moments, and Cliff, who just he yeah, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's Cliff. Cliff was Cliff. And to your point about if Jane was in a better place, her she
Mhm.
would have prevented
Yep.
all of that from happening.
Yep.
But since she wasn't, clearly it just went. I mean, to say it went sideways is like the probably the biggest understatement I've ever made on this show,
Because
because
I mean, if I remember correctly, I even thought there was a scene or two in season one where he wanted to go meet his daughter, and Jane or someone else on the team would always step in and say, that is not a good idea, and
exactly.
here's why, and
Yep.
talk some sense in him. But there was no one to do that,
Nope.
which led to him um, becoming to be selfish and
Yeah.
to say, no, I gotta do this. I'm sick of tired of watching Dorothy and Niles, and I want that. I want to feel something. Oh man, when he lays into Niles and says, "You better hold her,
Yeah.
because if you end up like me, you're never gonna feel that again." And that was such a moment where this is why I love Cliff, despite him being Cliff,
Yeah.
because he will say a line like that and
Yep.
you realize how much pain. Like, he's a tin man, but
Hmm.
he is in some severe emotional pain because
Yes.
he cannot feel anything.
Nope. Yeah. Yeah. That was a very powerful moment. You're right. Yeah. You're so right. And yeah, I mean that. And then we see that at the end, and also thinking about when we see Cliff with his own father. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
very small scene, but
Mhm.
it was a very pivotal one because it really, you know, you know, especially when he delivered that line to Calder about holding her,
Yep.
and it shows how he did not want to end up just like his old man.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that whole arc was very, very strong. And even, even they talk about callback to the first season, and he was like talking to Claire. He's like, remember I left a watch at the at the at the restaurant, the stop, the where he wrestled it from the alligator.
Yep.
So it's just, and whenever she realizes that that's the case, and realizes that that is her father, but when we see her in the baby shot in her home, and her friends are consoling her, just so many like emotions that was at play in that scene, that um and again, if Jane had been in a place where she could have stopped him, or if Vic was there, like you said, if he wasn't back in Detroit, someone could have prevented him from really probably ending any chance that he may have of establishing a relationship with his daughter.
Right. Right. Absolutely. The final moment in this episode, well, I don't know if it's a final, but pretty much this episode ends with Dorothy breaking Danny Brick.
Mm-hmm.
And which I'm sure will lead into the fourth episode. Any final thoughts, Will?
Final thoughts. Speaking of Vic, and even though he hooked up, it was a very awkward boyfriend, awkward like let's have a relationship moment. Was pretty funny because Ronnie just really wasn't there. But of course, again, showing how Vic is just still very awkward. But also, whenever they did agree to have a date, and then he of course goes into cyborg mode, and finds out that she's a war criminal.
Mm-hmm.
And again, to your point, him being off from the rest of his teammates, and how he's going to deal with that, especially given his very weird, very like, I don't want to say a strange relationship with his father, but it is. I wonder how he's going to handle that, because he ends up leaving the restaurant, but also she was out in the parking lot. Afraid, I don't know if she was afraid to come in, or um, just sort of seeing how that's going to play out, because I don't think she's going to be a one-off character. I think she's going to end up playing a role with the team at some point this season.
Yeah, I don't think these writers do not seem to waste their time on characters who will not be weaved into future storylines or plot points. So we will definitely see her, because she also served as a greater point in Vic has always come off to be a bit arrogant because he
Mm-hmm.
is the Justice League member. He's the all-knowing, the supercomputer, do right, and this is what right is. And she shows him there's a gray area,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh
not
yeah,
everyone in judgment. And
yeah,
he's always in a state of judgment. I mean, that's
yes,
why he never really wanted to be a part of Doom Patrols, because he would judge all of them. These aren't heroes. These are
yeah,
just a bunch of freaks.
yeah. I'm glad you
Um,
brought that scene up, because that was that would definitely was one that really stood out to me, and especially in the context of what we were dealing with in the real world too. But in particular, his very judgmental, arrogant way, and she basically calling him out on it, and really calls him to have some self-reflection. So again, I think,
well, that's what you think. She calls him out on it.
yeah,
Then she stands him up, and I know she sent that email, and he found that information because she wanted him to,
yeah,
and that was a test, and he failed,
he did,
because as much as in that moment he realized something, he didn't. He still couldn't get over it, because if he did, he would have seen her in the car and got in the car with her,
that's
but
good,
he didn't.
yeah,
He tossed her aside essentially and said, "No, you're a war criminal. This will never work. I'm going to judge you again,"
yeah,
which
yeah,
which I think is the right move to make, because it would be weird for someone who is so ingrained with his beliefs about justice,
hmm
that to have one conversation with someone, granted he does bang her, and then run off and suddenly his whole worldview. No, that doesn't happen. It takes
Yeah.
a lot of conversations for your worldview to shift.
True. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, even though, yeah, he may have, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he did have a moment of like, okay, go ahead, kid, I'll let you go this time. But I think you're right. She did set him up to see if that lesson did carry through or not.
Yeah, girl's got some trust issues of her own.
Yep.
All right, I think that's it for us tonight. Clearly, we're excited and on board with Doom Patrol Season 2. More of that to come, along with finishing up Stargirl. Will, where can our listeners find you?
Yes, you can find me at Will M. Polk, WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at CNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, but most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.